So I've made a few videos now about World War III where I've really criticized the audio in this game, which has mostly been fixed since the major update that happened recently. I covered it in my last video about the game if you want more details about that. But as I continue cleaning up the remaining audio issues, I wanted to shift my focus to a few other things that I think need to get sorted out before World War III's free-to-play public beta release. When that rolls around, I expect a significant jump in players, including a lot of casual players who have been seeing videos about this game. A lot of people in that demographic might have little to no experience with indie games, so the first impression is extremely important to pull those people away from the major free-to-play titles like PUBG, Warzone, and Halo. There have been a lot of complaints about the connection issues from myself and other creators, and I think it's definitely the biggest priority on the list right now. Partying Up has apparently had tons of issues since the start of the closed beta, but to be honest, I can't comment on that too much since I don't really have anyone to play this game with anyway. I have noted though in previous videos that matchmaking times and in-game ping are really subpar. Matchmaking might be alleviated with the bump in players, since there will be a lot more to matchmake with, but ping definitely needs work. I'd also love to see a server browser at some point down the line so I can have a bit more agency over solving these problems myself. If you want a more in-depth commentary about the connection in this game, I'll link a nice video from BlueTheRobot in the description. The devs have been very active on social media discussing their work toward improving the connection in this game and the server maintenance they're doing, so I'm hopeful this will get a lot better. But it's been the Achilles heel of World War III since it initially launched several years ago. Connection is something they really have to get right because it'll put off the casual player base and they'll go running back to bigger titles. Next, I think the UI could use a bit of work. It's not terrible as is, but it's a bit unpolished. I'll make a few comparisons to other shooters on the market for a bit of inspiration as I give my thoughts here. For one, I think the bottom left space on the screen doesn't get utilized all that well. The health, armor, and mobility indicators are all too large for my liking, and I think there's a bit too much padding from the left and bottom sides of the screen. I'd like to see the mobility label removed and just change the armor color to indicate what mobility the character has. So green for high mobility, yellow for medium, red for low. I think we can also pull the score from the upper center of the screen and place it around the minimap in a very similar fashion to Battlefield 2042. I know Battlefield gets its fair share of criticisms for its UI, but I think this is a nice, elegant way of keeping track of the game's progress without it cluttering the center of the screen. This would also free up that top center portion of the screen to make the compass a lot more prominent, which I think would be really helpful in this game. In the lower right, I think this space is used pretty well for the most part, but I'd love to see some of these indicators be able to collapse themselves when they're not needed. A lot of single player games do this to promote immersion, and I think it could be a nice touch here. I don't think the strike points and score streak should be in the game at all, to be honest, and it would remove those indicators on the right of the screen completely. But otherwise, I'd suggest shrinking down the current strike points that the player has and only showing the strikes that the player currently has access to, rather than showing all of them regardless of the amount of points that the player has. The chat should be moved to the upper left to utilize that space, and the kill feed can then be moved further up into the upper right corner. I'd like for the player to also have a unique color in the kill feed. As it stands, the colors are red for an enemy, blue for a teammate, and green for both the player and squad mates. Maybe make the player's name yellow or something similar to easily distinguish at a glance from everyone else in the game. I'd also like to see an option to tweak the kill feed so the player has the choice to see no kill feed at all, only activity occurring nearby the player, only squad activity regardless of where they are on the map, or just everything. I'd like to see the button prompt that appears when you need to hold a key to get health or ammo moved up toward the center of the screen, just below the middle. Being so low forces the player to look down, and it's a lot more tedious to mind their surroundings. I'd also like a visible radius around the equipment on the ground to indicate how close I need to be to use it, and I'd like this distance to be a little more generous. Right now, I think you need to be a little too close to it. It's also not clear how close you need to be in order to activate the equipment. This would then leave space in the bottom center of the screen for all of those points that pop up when you shoot someone. It's a very Call of Duty style. Every time you shoot at someone in this game, a ton of points pop up in the right center of the screen, and it's super distracting. It works fine in Call of Duty since the players in that game die so quickly and the guns have virtually no recoil. But here it feels arbitrarily distracting, and I often can't hit my follow-up shots because of all of these distracting elements in a game that has a lot more recoil. To finish up, I'd love to see small widgets I can place in the corners of the screen, again very similar to Warzone, to see my ping and frame rate in real time, and I'd like the scoreboard to use ping rather than the vague signal symbols to indicate connection. After the UI, some quality of life adjustments would go a really long way. One of the biggest ones is when switching a loadout in the game. You have to go to a menu, and then when you click the loadout that you want to switch to, it takes you to a separate customization menu rather than throwing you back to the spawn screen. I think having a flyout for the player to click when they're hovering over the loadout, if they want to customize the loadout, would be a lot better. That way, if they just click the loadout itself, they get sent back to the spawn screen and can get right back into the action. I'd also like for that spawn screen to be a map instead of putting the squad spectating front and center. With such a similar system to Battlefield, I think it would be beneficial to take those last few steps in emulating Battlefield's style to allow the player to see the map at the center stage. with their teammates on it and a small square to spectate squad mates in the bottom right corner. It would be really nice if you could zoom in and out of this map as well, and I think it would really improve the spawn experience. Enemy players should also show up on the minimap when firing weapons unsuppressed. I really think this would help improve the pace of the game quite a bit, and it's something the casual player base comes to expect. A lot of major shooters with a minimap will have players pop up on the minimap when they shoot unsuppressed. I think this should be carried over here, at least within a certain vicinity of the player. That will really help improve the pace of this game. Finally, I'd really like to see the progression system improved. Ranking up and unlocking attachments feels a bit tedious, and I think a lot of new casual players will be put off by the grind, especially those that have jobs and other responsibilities that offer few opportunities to play video games. It's really disheartening to put a lot of time into a game, especially if you have very limited free time, and to really get very little for it. Bear in mind though, with all of my feedback, that this is still a beta, even in the free-to-play release, so it'll be constantly growing and evolving, and hopefully after some time out in the wild, it'll get a bit more polish and offer some real competition in what is really a woeful AAA FPS space right now. So that about wraps up things for me, but I want to hear from all of you. Is there anything specific you think needs some work? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to have a conversation. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like, and if you didn't, leave a dislike so I know I need to change something. Subscribe if you're new. We have a lot more World War III coverage on the way, and you'll definitely want to be around to catch it. I'd like to thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video.